The acid rain hammered against the maintenance bay's reinforced glass, like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Daniel Cross wiped the grease from his hands and squinted at the readout on his diagnostic tablet. The air filtration system at Mining Station Theta 9 was dying again, choking on its own accumulated toxins. Third time this month. "Harper, run another diagnostic on Filter Bank 4, he muttered to the AI interface embedded in his workstation. "Running diagnostic now. Though I could have told you the result before wasting computational cycles." Harper's synthesized voice carried its usual note of sardonic amusement. "The filter is completely corroded. Again. Because someone insisted on using substandard replacement parts last time. Those were the only parts available within 3 systems." Daniel shot back, pulling himself deeper into the maintenance shaft. The smell of ozone and rust filled his nostrils. "Unless you wanted everyone here to suffocate while waiting for premium components." "I don't breathe, so technically—" The conversation died as the overhead lights flickered. Daniel froze, his engineer's instincts screaming that something was wrong. The station's power grid was triple redundant. It never flickered. Then the sky tore open. Through the transparent aluminum ceiling, Daniel watched as reality itself seemed to fracture. Ships materialized from hyperspace, in formations that made his stomach turn, not the clean, organized emergence of human or allied vessels, but the chaotic, predatory swarm of Crixan raiders. Their biomechanical hulls glistened like wet chitin, reflecting the sickly yellow glow of the acid storms below. The station's alarm didn't wail, it screamed, a piercing note that sent everyone scrambling. Daniel's hands moved on autopilot, sealing the maintenance panel and sliding out of the shaft. His boots hit the deck just as the first plasma bolt struck the station's eastern hub. The impact threw him sideways into a support beam. Stars exploded across his vision, but he forced himself to move. Around him, miners and technicians ran in every direction, some toward escape pods, others toward defensive positions they'd drilled for, but never truly believed they'd need. "All personnel, this is Station Command." A voice crackled over the intercom, barely audible over the chaos. "Crixan forces have breached the outer perimeter. Evacuate to designated shelter zones immediately." Daniel's shelter zone was halfway across the station. He grabbed his emergency kit from the maintenance locker and joined the stream of panicking bodies flooding the main corridor. The station shook again, another direct hit. This time, the lights didn't flicker. They died. Emergency illumination kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. Through the press of bodies, Daniel caught glimpses of the external monitors. Crixan drop pods were latching onto the station's hull, like parasites, their organic drilling appendages already boring through the outer plating. A child's scream cut through the noise. Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. Through a gap in the crowd, he saw them, a group of young colonists, maybe 8 or 9 years old, huddled against the wall of the recreational dome. They must have been in the middle of their education cycle when the attack began. Their teacher, an elderly woman Daniel recognized as Margaret something or other, was trying to shepherd them toward the exits. But the press of fleeing adults kept pushing them back. And standing between them and the stampeding crowd was something Daniel had only seen in military broadcasts. A Vayrith warrior. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her elongated limbs corded with muscle that seemed carved from bronze. The bone-white combat armor she wore looked almost organic, flowing with her movements as she used her body as a living shield. Every time the crowd surged toward the children, she pushed back, her 4-fingered hands gentle despite their obvious strength. Daniel had heard about the Vayrith, everyone had. Warriors from a heavy-gravity world. They were humanity's occasional allies, more often neutral observers. They lived by a code of honor so strict that even their allies found it incomprehensible. What was one doing here, at a mining station in the middle of nowhere? Another explosion, closer this time. The recreational dome's ceiling cracked, and Daniel watched in horror as a section began to buckle. The Vayrith warrior, he could see her rank markings now. Some kind of advanced scout class, looked up at the failing structure. She had perhaps 2 seconds to move. She didn't. Instead, she spread her arms wider, covering more of the children. The ceiling came down in a cascade of twisted metal and polymer. Daniel heard the sickening crack, even over the chaos, the sound of bone giving way under impossible weight. The Vayrith's left leg twisted at an angle that made his stomach turn. But she didn't fall. She held her position, keeping the debris from crushing the children beneath her. Margaret finally managed to pull the children free, herding them toward an emergency exit. The Vayrith tried to follow, but the moment she put weight on her shattered leg, she collapsed. The crowd, blind with panic, was already surging toward her position. In seconds, she'd be trampled. Daniel's body moved before his brain could process the stupidity of what he was doing. He dove through the crowd, using his smaller size to slip between the fleeing bodies. Someone's elbow caught him in the ribs, stealing his breath. But he kept moving. The Vayrith was trying to drag herself clear with her arms, her face surprisingly human, despite the elongated features, and those unsettling amber eyes, twisted in pain. She saw Daniel approaching and made a gesture he didn't understand. Something sharp and dismissive. "Get back," she growled in accented but clear English. "This is not your concern." "Like hell it isn't." Daniel grabbed her under the arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her size. Must be the lower bone density from the high-gravity adaptation. "We need to move, now." "You don't understand," she hissed through clenched teeth. "My injury by Vayrith law. I must—" "Your law can wait," Daniel cut her off, already pulling her toward a maintenance alcove he'd spotted. "Living comes first." She resisted for a moment, those amber eyes blazing with something between anger and confusion. Then another explosion rocked the station, and pragmatism won. She let him help her, though he could feel the tension in her body, like a coiled spring ready to snap. The maintenance alcove was barely large enough for both of them. Daniel propped the Vayrith against the wall and immediately went to work, pulling supplies from his emergency kit. Her leg was bad compound fracture, of what looked like the tibia equivalent, though her anatomy was just different enough to make him uncertain. "You're wasting your time," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "Vayrith warriors do not accept aid when fallen in combat. It is shameful." "Good thing this isn't combat, then," Daniel replied, fashioning a makeshift splint from polymer strips and a tension rod he'd yanked from the wall. "This is a terrorist attack on civilians. Different rules." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. "You argue semantics while the station burns?" "I fix things while the station burns," Daniel corrected, tightening the splint. "It's what I do. Hold still. This is going to hurt." He didn't wait for permission before setting the bone. The Vayrith's hand shot out, grabbing his shoulder with enough force to leave bruises. But she didn't cry out. Her amber eyes locked onto his. And for a moment, Daniel felt like he was falling into them, ancient, prideful, and utterly alien. "What is your name?" she asked when he finished, her grip loosening but not releasing. "Daniel Cross, engineer, 2nd class. You—" "Neva Rahl, scout warrior of the 3rd Sept." She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You have done something very foolish." "Daniel Cross?" Before he could ask what she meant, the station's intercom crackled to life again. This time, it wasn't station command. The voice that emerged was wrong, too many harmonics, like multiple throats speaking in unison, the Crixon. "Inhabitants of mining station Theta 9, the voice buzzed. "Your resistance is noted and dismissed. We seek information regarding the stellar coordinates designated as pattern 779. Cooperate, and your deaths will be swift." Daniel felt Neva stiffen beside him. Her hand, still on his shoulder, tightened again. "They're here for the vault," she whispered. "The what?" "Ancient technology. Buried beneath the station. I was sent to—" She paused, pain and something else flickering across her features. "It doesn't matter now. We need to reach my ship. You can't walk on that leg." "Then you will help me." It wasn't a question. She looked at him with those burning amber eyes, and Daniel saw something shift in them. "By the laws of my people, you have bound yourself to my fate. You saved a fallen warrior against her will. Now, my life is tied to yours until the debt is repaid." "That's insane." "That is Varith law." She pulled herself up using the wall, testing the splint. "And whether you accept it or not, Daniel Cross, we are now bound. The Crixin want what lies beneath the station. If they get it, your Earth and every world in this sector will burn." Another explosion, this one close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Through the alcove's small window, Daniel could see Crixin warriors emerging from their pods, nightmarish fusions of insect and machine, their multiple limbs ending in weapons that looked grown rather than built. "My ship is in Docking Bay 7, Neva said, already moving despite her injury. "It has medical facilities that can properly treat this wound, and weapons." "Bay 7 is halfway across the station," Daniel protested, even as he moved to support her. "Through the areas already under attack." "Then we move fast." She produced a weapon from somewhere in her armor, a sleek thing that looked more like artwork than a gun. "Can you fight?" "I fix things," Daniel repeated, but he pulled the plasma cutter from his kit. It wasn't meant for combat, but it would burn through Crixin chitin as easily as metal plating. "Fighting isn't exactly my specialty." "It is mine," Neva said. And despite everything, the pain, the chaos, the absurdity of their situation, she smiled. It was a predator's expression, all teeth and promise. "Stay close, Daniel Cross. Try not to die. It would be inconvenient." They emerged from the alcove into hell. The main corridor was a war zone. Station security was making a stand near the central hub, their projectile weapons chattering against Crixin bioarmor. Bodies lay scattered human, mostly. But Daniel spotted at least one Crixin warrior down, its multiple limbs still twitching. Neva moved with deadly grace despite her injury, her weapon speaking in whispers of superheated air. Each shot found its mark, dropping Crixin warriors before they even knew she was there. Daniel stayed close, using his cutter to seal doors behind them, slowing pursuit. They were 3 sections from the docking bay when they ran into the children again. Margaret had gotten them into an emergency shelter, but the door had jammed. Daniel could see the problem immediately. A power coupling had been damaged in the attacks. The elderly teacher was frantically trying to override the manual controls, while the children huddled behind her. And advancing on them was a Crixin kill squad, their weapons already charging. Neva raised her weapon, but Daniel saw her leg buckle slightly. The injury was worse than she was letting on. She wouldn't be able to hold them off alone. "Fix the door," Neva commanded, already firing. "I'll handle them." Daniel wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. He dove for the control panel, his hands already pulling tools from his kit. The coupling was fried, but if he could reroute power from the emergency lighting. A Crixin warrior broke through Neva's fire, its blade arm sweeping toward the children. Neva threw herself in its path, taking the strike on her armor. The impact sent her spinning, her injured leg giving out completely. Daniel's hands moved faster, stripping wires, making connections that would have failed every safety protocol in the book. The door shuddered, beginning to open. Inside. Now. Margaret didn't need to be told twice, shepherding the children through the widening gap. The Crixin warrior loomed over Neva, its weapon raised for a killing blow. Daniel didn't think he just moved, bringing the plasma cutter up and triggering it at maximum output. The beam caught the creature in what might have been its head, and it reeled back with a sound like breaking glass. Neva used the distraction to fire point blank into its center mass. The Crixin fell, twitching. Daniel helped her up, and together they stumbled through the door, sealing it behind them. The shelter was small, crowded with terrified civilians, but it was secure. For now. That was foolish, Neva said, but there was something different in her tone. Respect. Maybe. You're not a warrior. No, Daniel agreed, already working on reinforcing the door's locking mechanism. But I'm apparently bound to one. So I better learn fast. She looked at him for a long moment, those amber eyes unreadable. You truly don't understand what you've done. Do you, by saving me? By binding our fates, you've made yourself a target. The Crixin will know. They always know who carries the weight of Vayrith honor. Then we better make sure your ship is as good as you say, Daniel replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The station shook again, but this time it felt different, deeper. Daniel's engineer instincts screamed a warning. They're not just raiding, he said, understanding flooding through him. They're drilling. They're going straight down to whatever's buried here. Neva nodded grimly. The vault. Technology from the first expansion. When your people and mine were allies. Before the separation. Before the wars. What kind of technology? The kind that reshapes worlds, she said quietly. Or destroys them. Margaret approached them. The children clustered behind her. The emergency broadcast said evacuation ships are launching from Bay 12. We need to get these children there. Daniel looked at Neva, then at the children. Bay 12 was in the opposite direction from Bay 7. They couldn't do both. Go, Neva said. Get them to safety. Your duty is to your own kind. What about your ship, your medical equipment? I'll manage. Daniel stared at her. This alien warrior who'd stood between children and death. Who'd taken injuries that should have dropped her, but kept fighting anyway. He thought about duty, about honor, about the strange laws that bound them together now. Harper, he said to his wristcom, hoping the AI was still connected to the station's network. You still with me? Barely. Harper's voice crackled through heavy interference. The Crixin are playing havoc with the communication systems. Also, you're an idiot for not evacuating when you had the chance. Can you remote pilot a ship from Bay 7 to Bay 12? There was a pause. Theoretically, if it's connected to the station grid, and if the Crixin haven't completely destroyed the navigation relays, and if you're about to do something stupidly heroic again. Daniel looked at Neva. What's your ship's access code? She stared at him. You would trust an AI with my ship? I trust Harper. Do you trust me? It was a loaded question, weighted with implications neither of them fully understood yet. Neva was silent for a long moment, then spoke a series of numbers and Vayrith words that Daniel's translator couldn't parse. Harper, you get that? Got it. Initiating remote startup sequence now. You have approximately 6 minutes before the Crixin overrun your position. By the way, Daniel turned to Margaret. We're all going to Bay 12, together. But her leg, Margaret started. I've got her. Daniel positioned himself under Neva's arm, taking most of her weight. You focus on the children. We move fast. We move together. And we all get out of this alive. Neva leaned into him, and he could feel her trembling not from fear. He realized, but from fighting against her own cultural conditioning. Accepting help. Showing weakness. It went against everything her people believed. You continue to surprise me, Daniel Cross, she murmured. Day's not over yet, he replied, then raised his voice. Everyone ready on 3. 1, 2. They burst from the shelter into chaos. The station was coming apart around them, sections venting into the toxic atmosphere. Through the failing gravity fields and emergency force fields, Daniel could see the massive drilling apparatus the Crixin had deployed, a writhing mechanical worm, boring straight down through the station's foundation. They ran, or in Daniel and Neva's case, stumbled quickly. Margaret kept the children together, moving with surprising agility for her age. Behind them, Daniel could hear the Crixin advancing, their multiple legs clicking against the deck plates. Bay 12's doors loomed ahead, already starting to close as the evacuation protocol engaged. They weren't going to make it. "Harper!" Daniel shouted. "On it." The doors stopped, held open by Harper's override. They tumbled through just as plasma fire erupted behind them. Daniel turned to see a wave of Crixin warriors round the corner, their weapons already tracking. Neva raised her gun, but Daniel saw her power cell was nearly depleted. Maybe 3 shots left. Then, salvation appeared in the form of her ship, a sleek Varith scout vessel that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of obsidian. It descended into the bay with Harper's characteristic lack of subtlety, its weapon systems already online. The ship's pulse cannons spoke with authority, sending the Crixin scrambling for cover. A boarding ramp extended, and Margaret wasted no time getting the children aboard. Daniel, half carried, half dragged Neva up the ramp. The interior was all smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift in his peripheral vision. He deposited her in what looked like a medical alcove and turned to help with the evacuation. The last of the civilians were boarding when the station's superstructure groaned a deep, agonizing sound that Daniel felt in his bones. "They've reached it," Neva said from behind him. She dragged herself to a viewing port, staring down at the drilling site. "The vault. They've found it." Through the port, Daniel could see it too, something vast and metallic emerging from beneath the station, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. It pulsed with a light that didn't belong to any spectrum he knew. "We need to go," he said. "Now." But Neva was staring at him with those impossible amber eyes, and he saw something in them that made his blood run cold. Recognition, understanding, fear. "The vault responds to genetic markers," she said quietly. "It was designed to recognize the descendants of those who created it. The Crixin couldn't activate it, even if they tried. But you—" She reached out, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. Where she touched, his skin began to glow with the same impossible light as the vault. "What did you say your family name was?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Cross," Daniel said, staring at his glowing skin in horror. "My name is Daniel Cross." "Cross," Neva repeated. "In the old tongue, that would be—" "Cross. The architects. The builders." She looked at him with something approaching awe. "Your ancestors helped create the vault, Daniel. And now the Crixin know you exist." The ship shuddered as Harper initiated emergency launch procedures. Through the viewport, Daniel could see Crixin ships converging on their position, drawn like moths to a flame. To him, "What have I done?" he whispered. Neva gripped his hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. "You saved lives. You saved me. And now we save everyone else." She managed a fierce smile despite the pain. "Welcome to the war, Daniel Cross. I hope your Earth is ready for what comes next." The ship burst free from the dying station, diving into the acid storms below as Crixin vessels gave chase. Behind them, the vault continued to rise, its alien geometries defying comprehension, waiting for the touch of its creator's descendant. Daniel looked at his still glowing hand, then at Neva. This alien warrior who'd somehow become his responsibility, or perhaps he'd become hers. He thought about his quiet life as an engineer, fixing filters and maintaining systems, and realized that life was gone forever. "Harper," he called out. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed." "Oh, good," the AI replied sarcastically. "I was worried this wasn't going to get more complicated." As the ship climbed through the toxic atmosphere, racing against the Crixin fleet, Daniel felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He just wanted to fix an air filter. Instead, he'd stumbled into an ancient conflict, bound himself to an alien warrior, and apparently activated a doomsday device with his DNA. Just another day at mining station Theta 9. Except the station was gone. The Crixen were hunting him, and he had a 7-foot-tall alien warrior bleeding in his ship, who claimed they were now bonded for life. He looked at Neva, who was watching him with those unsettling amber eyes. "So," he said, trying for levity despite everything, "this life debt thing, is there a manual? Some kind of orientation packet?" She actually laughed a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "You really don't understand what you've done. But you will, Daniel Cross. You will." The ship plunged into hyperspace, leaving the Crixen fleet behind. For now. But Daniel knew they would follow. They had to. He was the key to the vault. And the vault was the key to something much larger. Something that could save worlds. Or destroy them all. The hyperspace jump felt wrong. Daniel had made dozens of them during his years as a maintenance engineer. But this one sent ice through his veins. The ship's bio-responsive walls pulsed with an urgent rhythm, and even Harper's usually sardonic commentary had gone silent. "Something's interfering with our navigation," Neva said from the medical alcove, where she'd been treating her leg with the ship's advanced healing systems. The bone-knitting nanites were doing their work, but she still moved carefully as she made her way to the pilot station. "We're being pulled off course." Daniel checked the readings, his engineer's mind already calculating trajectories. "We're not going to make it to Earth. Whatever's pulling us, it's massive." "The vault," Neva confirmed, her amber eyes reflecting the swirling chaos of hyperspace visible through the main viewport. "It's creating a gravity well that extends into higher dimensions. The Crixen must have activated its retrieval protocols." Retrieval protocols. Daniel's hand was still glowing faintly, the light pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. "You mean it's trying to bring me back? Not just you. Anyone with the genetic markers. Your ancestors built safeguards into the system." She adjusted their course, fingers dancing over controls that seemed to reshape themselves to match her touch. "We need to drop out of hyperspace before the stress tears the ship apart." The evacuation transport carrying Margaret and the children had already split off on a different vector, heading for the nearest Federation outpost. At least they were safe. Daniel held on to that thought as reality twisted around them. They emerged in normal space with a violent lurch that sent Daniel sprawling. Outside, the void was anything but empty. Dozens of Crixen bioships hung in formation around a massive structure that defied conventional geometry, the vault, now fully emerged from beneath the destroyed mining station, rotating slowly in space like a crystalline nightmare. "Harper, full stealth mode," Daniel ordered, pulling himself back to his feet. "Already done, though I doubt it matters." The AI responded, "They're not scanning for us. They're scanning for you specifically. That glowing hand of yours is basically a beacon screaming, 'Here I am, come get me.'" Neva moved to the weapons console, her movements still favoring her injured leg. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before they triangulate our position. The ship's shields won't hold against a concentrated assault." Daniel stared at the vault, its alien architecture making his eyes water. Symbols crawled across its surface like living things, and deep in his mind, he felt something stirring, not quite memory, not quite instinct, but something older. Knowledge he shouldn't have. "I can read it," he whispered. Neva's head snapped toward him. "What?" "The symbols on the vault. I can read them." Daniel moved closer to the viewport, his glowing hand pressed against the transparent material. "It's a medical facility. No. More than that. It's a restoration engine, designed to repair biological damage on a massive scale." "That's impossible. The language of the first expansion has been dead for millennia." "Tell that to my brain," Daniel muttered, struggling to process the flood of information. "The Crixen have it all wrong. It's not a weapon. It's the opposite. It was built to heal worlds after the Great Burning, to restore what was lost in the war between." He trailed off as another piece of knowledge clicked into place. This one, making his blood run cold. Between humans and Vayrith, he finished. Our people weren't just allies. We were partners in creating this. That's why you're here. Isn't it your people knew about the vault? Neva was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. The Third Sept has maintained watchers at key sites for generations. When the vault's energy signature appeared 3 months ago, I was sent to investigate. I didn't expect the Crixen to move so quickly. Or to find someone like me, Daniel added. He turned from the viewport to face her. This life debt thing, it's not really about honor. Is it? It's about the vault. About making sure the right person activates it. No. Neva's response was immediate and fierce. The life debt is real. You saved me when my own people's laws said I should die. That creates a bond that transcends politics or ancient artifacts. She paused, her expression softening slightly. But I won't lie to you. The Council will see this as providence. A crosshair bound to a Vayrith warrior at the moment the vault emerges. They'll call it fate. I call it a mess, Harper interjected. Incoming transmission from the lead Crixen vessel. They're demanding our surrender. Put them through, Daniel said, an idea forming in his mind. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a Crixen commander. Its multiple eyes focused on Daniel with an intensity that made his skin crawl. When it spoke, the harmonics of its voice reverberated through the ship. Crosshair, it buzzed. You will submit to extraction. The vault requires your genetic template to achieve full activation. Resistance will result in the termination of your companion. You don't even know what it does, Daniel said, stepping forward. The vault isn't a weapon. It's a healing engine designed to repair the damage from an ancient war. If you force an activation without understanding the protocols, you could destroy entire systems. The Crixen's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Your concern is noted and irrelevant. The strong take what they require, submit, or watch your protector die. The transmission cut off, and immediately the ship shuddered under impact from a warning shot. Options, Daniel asked, his mind racing. Few and terrible, Neva replied, already charging weapons. This ship isn't built for extended combat. We might take 3, perhaps 4 of them before they overwhelm us. What if we don't fight? Daniel looked at his glowing hand again, the light pulsing stronger now. What if we give them exactly what they want? That's insane, Harper said flatly. No. Listen. The vault needs my genetic signature to activate. Right. But it also needs the proper protocols. I can feel them in my head, like instructions written in my DNA. He turned to Neva. Your people helped build this. Do you have any records of the activation sequence? Neva's eyes widened in understanding. You want to activate it incorrectly, deliberately. Not incorrectly, incompletely. Give them enough to think they've won, but hold back the key components. Daniel was already moving to the ship's computer, his fingers flying over the interface. Harper, can you create a partial genetic template? Something that looks complete but isn't? That's either brilliant or suicidal, the AI responded. Possibly both. Give me 30 seconds. Another impact rocked the ship. The Crixen were done with warnings. We don't have 30 seconds, Neva said, watching multiple bioships converging on their position. Daniel made a decision that surprised even him. He grabbed Neva's hand, and where their skin touched, the glow from his hand spread to hers. She gasped, her amber eyes going wide. What are you doing? Sharing the burden, Daniel said. The vault was built by both our peoples. Maybe it needs both of us to work properly. He could feel something flowing between them, not just energy, but information, memories that weren't quite his own. Trust me. For a moment, they stood frozen, connected by light and something deeper. Then Neva squeezed his hand and nodded. "Harper, broadcast our surrender," she ordered. "Tell them we'll cooperate." "I really hope you two know what you're doing," the AI muttered, but complied. The Crixan response was immediate. A tractor beam locked onto their ship, pulling them toward the largest biovessel. Through the viewport, Daniel could see boarding tubes extending like grasping fingers. "Remember," he whispered to Neva, "incomplete activation. We need to make them think they've succeeded while keeping the real power locked away." She nodded, but didn't release his hand. The glow had spread up both their arms now, creating patterns that looked almost like circuitry, or maybe like veins of light. The boarding tube connected with a wet, organic sound that made Daniel's stomach turn. Crixan warriors poured through living nightmares of chitin and metal, their weapons trained on the two of them. The commander entered last, its bulk barely fitting through the passage. Up close, Daniel could see that parts of it were more machine than organism, ancient technology grafted onto biological matter. "You will come," it commanded. "Both of you. The vault responds to your combined signature." Interesting. They were marched, or in Neva's case, limped through the bioship's disturbing corridors. The walls pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't quite regular, and the air smelled of ozone and something organic that Daniel didn't want to identify. The vault loomed before them, now connected to the Crixan ship by massive umbilicals that looked disturbingly alive. This close, Daniel could feel it pulling at him, at the knowledge locked in his genes. "Activate it," the commander ordered. Daniel and Neva exchanged glances. Together, they approached the vault's interface, a crystalline surface that rippled like water at their approach. Daniel placed his glowing hand against it, and Neva did the same. The response was immediate. The vault's entire structure lit up, symbols racing across its surface faster than the eye could follow. Daniel felt the knowledge flooding through him, and he carefully, deliberately, held parts of it back. He gave the vault just enough to begin its startup sequence, but not enough to fully activate. Around them, the Crixan chittered in what sounded like celebration. Energy began to flow from the vault into their ship, and Daniel watched in horror as the biovessel began to change, growing larger, more aggressive. "Yes," the commander hissed. "The power of restoration, turn to our purpose. We will remake ourselves, become unstoppable." But something was wrong. The energy flow was increasing, but it was unstable. The vault symbols began flashing red, a warning that only Daniel could read. "It's rejecting the forced integration," he said quietly to Neva. "The vault knows the Crixan aren't trying to heal. They're trying to weaponize it. Can you stop it?" "Not without completing the activation sequence, and if I do that..." "The Crixan get everything they want," Neva finished. The commander must have sensed their hesitation because it moved closer, one of its blade arms extending toward Neva's throat. "Continue the activation, or she dies." Daniel felt rage flood through him, pure, human anger at seeing someone threaten a person under his protection. His hand began to glow brighter, and the vault responded, its hum rising to a crescendo. "You want the full activation," he snarled. "Fine. But you're not going to like what happens next." He slammed both hands against the vault's interface and opened his mind completely to the ancient knowledge. But instead of just accepting it, he did something his ancestors had built into the system. He challenged it. The vault had been designed with a failsafe. If someone tried to use it for destruction rather than healing, it would demand a test, a proof of worthiness. The crystalline surface beneath his hands liquefied, pulling both him and Neva into the vault itself. They found themselves in a space that couldn't physically exist, a vast chamber filled with swirling lights that might have been stars, or might have been memories. At its center stood two figures, translucent and ancient. One was recognizably human, though taller and more graceful than modern humans. The other was Varith, but with features that suggested an earlier evolutionary branch. "Crosshair," the human figure spoke, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. Real air. You stand at the threshold. The vault can heal or destroy, create or unmake. What is your intention? To stop the Crixin from weaponizing it, Daniel said immediately. To protect those who cannot protect themselves, Neva added. The figures studied them for what felt like eternity. Then, the Varith one spoke. The vault was our greatest collaboration and our greatest failure. We built it to heal the wounds of war, but its power corrupted those who sought to control it. That is why we sealed it, why we scattered the keys across bloodlines. You carry those keys, the human added. But more than that, you carry something we did not foresee. The bond between you freely chosen, not engineered. The cross heir who saves without thought of reward. The real heir who accepts help despite her pride. Perhaps you can succeed where we failed. What do we need to do? Daniel asked. Choose, both figures said in unison. The vault can restore one world completely, heal all damage, reverse centuries of decay, or it can create a wave of restoration that touches many worlds lightly, planting seeds of recovery that will take generations to bloom. One miracle, or 1,000 small hopes. Daniel looked at Neva, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her amber eyes. The choice was obvious. The 1,000, they said together. The figures smiled, at least. Daniel thought they did. It was hard to tell as they began to fade. Then, you must bind the vault to your combined genetic signature. It will only respond to both of you, together. This is the price of its power, eternal partnership. Before Daniel could ask what that meant, reality crashed back around them. They were standing in the Crixin ship, but everything had changed. The vault was fully active now, but its energy wasn't flowing into the biovessel. Instead, it was building up, preparing for something massive. The commander screeched in rage. What have you done? Exactly what the vault was designed to do, Daniel replied, his hand finding Neva's. Their combined glow was blinding now. Heal, restore, make things better. Everything you're not. The vault pulsed, and a wave of energy exploded outward. It passed through the Crixin ship harmlessly. But Daniel could see the commander's cybernetic implants beginning to malfunction. The forced fusion of technology and biology was being rejected, reversed. No! The commander lunged at them, but Neva was ready. Despite her injured leg, she moved with liquid grace, using the commander's own momentum to send it crashing into the vault's interface. The moment the Crixin touched the crystalline surface, it screamed a sound that threatened to shatter Daniel's eardrums. The vault's energy coursed through it, stripping away the mechanical additions, revealing the biological creature beneath. It collapsed, smaller, weaker, but somehow more whole. Around them, the same thing was happening to every Crixin on the ship. Their weapons, their mechanical enhancements. All of it was being dissolved by the vault's restoration wave. We need to go, Neva said urgently. The ship's biosystems are failing without the mechanical supports. They ran, hand in hand, their combined light showing the way through corridors that were already beginning to collapse. Behind them, the vault continued its work, sending out waves of restoration energy that would eventually reach hundreds of worlds. They made it to their ship just as the Crixin vessel began to truly fail. Harper had already initiated launch procedures, and they cleared the dying bioship just before it imploded. Through the viewport, they watched as the vault sent out one final, massive pulse of energy. It spread through space like ripples on a cosmic pond, heading for worlds that had been scarred by war, poisoned by industry, or broken by neglect. It's beautiful, Neva breathed. It's done, Daniel corrected, exhaustion suddenly catching up with him. The vault's spent. It'll take centuries to recharge for another activation like that. Then we succeeded. The Crixin can't use it, and hundreds of worlds will begin to heal. Daniel looked at their still joined hands, the glow finally beginning to fade. About what those ancient figures said, Eternal partnership. What does that mean for us? Neva was quiet for a moment, then turned to face him fully. In the old days, when human and Varith worked together, there was a ceremony, a binding of souls, they called it. Partners who would stand together against any threat, united in purpose. She paused, vulnerability flickering across her features. The life debt I owe you is one thing. This would be something we choose. Partners, Daniel said, testing the word. Protecting the vault, making sure no one misuses it again, making sure the restoration takes hold properly. It would mean leaving Earth, Neva pointed out. Traveling to the affected worlds, monitoring the restoration, dealing with those who would try to stop it. Daniel thought about his old life, fixing air filters, maintaining systems, keeping his head down and avoiding trouble. Then he looked at Neva, this remarkable warrior who'd literally stood between children and death, who'd trusted him with her life and her mission. Earth will still be there, he said finally. But this is something only we can do. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her alien features into something beautiful. Harper, set course for the nearest affected world. We have work to do. Oh, good, the AI sighed dramatically. From taxi service to galactic restoration monitoring, my processing cores are simply thrilled. But even Harper couldn't maintain the sarcasm. As they watched, the vault began to shift, its crystalline structure reconfiguring into something new. A station, Daniel realized, a base of operations for the work ahead. It's adapting, he said in wonder, creating what we need. The ancestors built well, Neva agreed. They knew someone would eventually need to oversee the restoration. A message beacon activated on their console, a distress signal from a world already touched by the restoration wave. People were frightened, confused by the sudden changes to their poisoned atmosphere, the withered plants that were suddenly blooming. Daniel and Neva looked at each other, and he saw his own determination reflected in her amber eyes. Shall we? He asked, gesturing toward the console. Together, she confirmed. As their ship turned toward its new heading, the vault station, following in their wake, Daniel realized that his life as a simple engineer really was over. But what lay ahead, partnership with a remarkable warrior, the chance to heal worlds. The adventure of a lifetime was worth any price. The glow had faded from their skin, but Daniel could still feel the connection, the bond that the vault had recognized and strengthened. They were bound now, not by debt or obligation, but by choice and purpose. Hey, Neva, he said as stars streaked past the viewport. Thank you for trusting me, for choosing this. She squeezed his hand, and for a moment, the glow returned soft, warm, and strangely comforting. Thank you, she replied, for showing me that strength isn't always about fighting alone. Harper's voice broke the moment. If you two are done being sentimental, we have 342 worlds showing signs of restoration activity, at least a dozen panicking governments, and what appears to be a very confused Crixan fleet that just lost all their weaponry. This is going to be a very long mission. Daniel and Neva exchanged grins. Good thing we have time, Daniel said. All the time in the universe, Neva agreed. The ship sailed on through the stars, carrying two unlikely partners toward a future neither could have imagined. Behind them, the vault station followed, a monument to what could be achieved when different peoples chose cooperation over conquest, healing over harm. And somewhere in the void, on hundreds of worlds, the first seeds of restoration began to sprout. The first restored world they reached was Kalora Prime, a mining colony that had been dying for decades. Daniel watched through the viewport as their ship descended through an atmosphere that should have been toxic yellow, but was now showing streaks of blue. The transformation is happening faster than the models predicted, Neva observed from the co-pilot seat, her fingers dancing over the sensor controls. The restoration wave is adapting to each world's specific damage. That's not in any of the ancestral knowledge, Daniel said, frowning. The vault is learning, evolving. Or perhaps, Harper interjected, it's responding to you two. Your combined genetic signature didn't just activate it. You gave it purpose, direction. The vault knows what you want it to do. They landed near the colony's main settlement, where crowds had gathered in the streets, staring at the sky in wonder and fear. Plants that had been withered stumps that morning were now showing green shoots. The acidic rain that had fallen for generations was now merely water. As Daniel and Neva descended the ramp, a woman rushed forward middle-aged, wearing the practical gear of a colonial administrator, her face a mixture of hope and suspicion. "I'm Governor Sarah Hendricks," she said, her eyes moving between them. "Are you responsible for what's happening to our world?" "In a way," Daniel replied carefully. "We activated an ancient restoration system. Your world is healing itself." "Duh. Healing." Hendricks laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Our entire economy is based on mining toxic minerals that only form in polluted soil. If the contamination is gone, then you'll need a new economy," Neva said bluntly. "One based on life rather than death." The governor's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, a commotion erupted nearby. A group of miners had surrounded a patch of newly sprouted vegetation, and one of them was pouring industrial waste on it, trying to kill the growth. "Stop!" Daniel rushed forward, but Neva was faster. She moved like liquid shadow, disarming the man before he could empty the container. "You don't understand," the miner gasped, struggling in her grip. "If the toxins are gone, the rare earth elements won't form. We'll have nothing to export. We'll starve." Daniel felt the weight of unintended consequences settling on his shoulders. They'd chosen to heal hundreds of worlds, but they hadn't considered that some people had built their lives around the damage. "Show us your mining operations," he said to Governor Hendricks. "Maybe we can find a solution." The mining complex was a testament to human adaptation structures built to withstand acid rain, extraction systems designed for toxic soil, an entire infrastructure centered on poison. As they toured the facilities, Daniel's engineer mind was already working on the problem. "The restoration isn't instantaneous," he explained to the gathered mining supervisors. "The toxic deposits you've been mining are still there, just sealed beneath a layer of regenerating soil. With the right equipment, you could still extract them without damaging the healing ecosystem." "And then what?" Hendricks demanded. "In a generation, maybe two, the deposits will be exhausted. What do we do then?" Neva stepped forward, her amber eyes scanning the crowd. "You adapt. You evolve. My people's world went through similar changes centuries ago. We learned to cultivate rather than simply extract. These new plants growing here, they're not just random vegetation. They're specifically designed to thrive in your world's conditions. Some of them will have properties you've never seen before." She knelt beside a cluster of the new growth, her fingers gentle on the leaves. "This one, for instance, on my world, we call it heartvine. Its fibers are stronger than carbon steel when properly treated, and it grows from seed to harvest in 30 days. The crowd murmured, interest replacing some of the fear. Daniel felt a surge of admiration for Neva. She understood something he was still learning. Healing wasn't just about fixing damage. It was about helping people find new ways forward. They spent 3 days on Kalora Prime, setting up monitoring stations and teaching the colonists how to work with the restoration rather than against it. Daniel designed new extraction equipment that could reach the deep deposits without disrupting the surface healing. Neva organized teams to catalog and study the new plant species. But on the 4th day, everything changed. Harper's alarm pierced the morning calm. "Incoming vessels, 43 ships, mixed configuration. They're not Crixon." Daniel and Neva rushed to their ship's command deck. Through the viewport, They could see the fleet dropping out of hyperspace, a motley collection of vessels from dozens of different worlds. "They're all from restored worlds," Harper reported. "And they're not happy." The lead ship opened communications, and the screen filled with faces human, Varith, and species Daniel didn't recognize. At their center was a human man with cybernetic implants covering half his face. "I am Marcus Steele, speaking for the Coalition of the Transformed," he announced. "You two have committed an act of unprecedented aggression against hundreds of sovereign worlds. You will answer for your crimes." "Crimes?" Daniel stepped forward. "We healed your worlds. We gave you a chance at a better future." "You destroyed our way of life," Steele snarled. "My world ran on nuclear fission plants that your restoration has somehow neutralized. 3 billion people without power. Industry collapsed overnight." Other voices joined in. A chorus of grievance. Worlds where the restoration had disrupted everything from agriculture to transportation. Places where the sudden growth of vegetation had destroyed cities. Where cleaned water had flooded areas that had adapted to drought. "You didn't ask," Steele continued, his organic eye blazing with fury. "You decided for all of us. And now you'll face judgment." The fleet began to surround them. Daniel felt Neva tense beside him, her hand moving to her weapon, but he touched her arm gently. "Wait," he said quietly. Then louder, addressing the Coalition. "You're right. We didn't ask. We made a choice in a moment of crisis, thinking only of healing, not of consequences. But the restoration can be guided, shaped. We can help you adapt." "We don't want your help," Steele spat. "We want compensation. We want control. Transfer the Vault's command codes to the Coalition, and we might let you live." "That's not possible," Neva said firmly. "The Vault is genetically locked to us. It was designed that way to prevent exactly what you're suggesting control by committee. Restoration turned into a tool of politics. Then you leave us no choice." Steele cut the communication. The Coalition ships opened fire simultaneously. Daniel barely had time to grab onto something before their ship bucked under the barrage. Shields flared and died within seconds. "Hull breach in sections 3 through 8, Harper announced with uncharacteristic calm. "Engines offline. Life support failing. I'd suggest abandoning ship, but that would require the ship to still have functional escape pods." Through the failing shields, Daniel could see boarding craft launching from the Coalition vessels. They had minutes at most. "The Vault station," Neva said suddenly. "It's still following us. If we can reach it." "It's 300 kilometers away," Daniel protested. "We'll never make it in a damaged ship." "Not in the ship." Neva was already moving, pulling him toward the emergency equipment locker. "Outside it." She handed him an emergency EVA suit, ancient by modern standards but functional. As he struggled into it, she explained rapidly. "The restoration wave changed us when we activated the Vault. I can feel it. Can't you? We're connected to it in ways beyond the genetic lock." Daniel paused, realizing she was right. Ever since the activation, he'd felt something different. A warmth in his chest, a sense of connection to something vast and purposeful. "You want to spacewalk 300 kilometers? I want to call the Vault to us." She sealed her own suit, her amber eyes meeting his through the helmet visor. "Together, trust me." They moved to the airlock as the first boarding craft attached to their hull. Daniel could hear cutting tools working on the inner doors. In minutes, the Coalition forces would be through. The outer airlock opened, and they stepped into the void. Space was silent, vast, and utterly hostile. Daniel's suit readings showed they had maybe an hour of air. The Vault station hung in the distance like a crystalline moon, impossibly far away. "Take my hand," Neva said through the suitcom. The moment their gloved fingers touched, Daniel felt it, the connection flaring to life. The Vault knew they were in danger. More than that, it was responding, reaching out to them across the void. Light began to emanate from their joined hands, visible even through the suit material. The same light answered from the vault station, a beam of coherent energy that wrapped around them like a lifeline. They were moving, not just drifting, but being pulled through space at impossible speed. Daniel's physics training screamed that this was wrong, that the acceleration should have killed them instantly. But the light seemed to exist outside normal space-time, carrying them in a bubble of altered reality. Behind them, the Coalition boarding parties reached their ship's command deck, finding it empty. Daniel caught a glimpse of their confusion through a still-functioning external camera feed that Harper was somehow transmitting to his helmet display. "Goodbye, temporary flesh companions." Harper's voice crackled through the comm. "I'm transferring myself to the vault station systems. Try not to break any more ships." They reached the vault station in less than a minute, the energy field depositing them gently in what seemed to be a docking bay that hadn't existed moments before. The structure was still reshaping itself, responding to their needs. As they removed their helmets, alarms began sounding. The Coalition fleet was moving to surround the station. "They can't damage it, can they?" Daniel asked. "The vault survived buried under a planet for millennia," Neva replied. "But they can make our lives very difficult." They made their way to what was becoming the station's command center. Surfaces rose from the floor to meet them, forming control interfaces that matched their specific biometrics. The walls became transparent, offering a full view of the surrounding fleet. "Incoming transmission," Harper announced, his voice now emanating from the station itself. Steele appeared on a forming view screen, his rage barely contained. "You think hiding in that relic will save you? We have 300 worlds worth of grievances. We'll siege you for centuries if necessary." "Or," Daniel said, an idea forming, "you could actually talk to us, work with us. The restoration isn't a fixed program, it's adaptive, responsive. Every world's needs are different. We could help you shape it, guide it to minimize disruption. Why should we trust you?" "Because," Neva said, stepping forward, "we're trapped here just as much as you're struggling out there. The vault bound us to this mission. We couldn't abandon it if we wanted to. Our only choice is to make it work. For everyone." Steele was silent for a moment, the other Coalition members debating audibly in the background. Finally, a new voice spoke elderly, measured, belonging to a Vayrith elder whose scales had gone pale with age. "I am Elder Thane of the Second Sept," she said. "I propose a test. One world, heavily damaged, where the restoration is causing maximum disruption. If you can guide the process to a beneficial outcome that the inhabitants accept, we will consider cooperation. Fail, and you surrender control of the vault to the Coalition." "We can't surrender control," Daniel protested. "It's genetically locked." "But you can agree to follow Coalition directives in how you use it." Elder Thane interrupted. "Bound service rather than independent action." Daniel and Neva exchanged glances. It was a trap, obviously. They'd be given an impossible situation, set up to fail. But what choice did they have? "Which world?" Neva asked. "Ferox 6, Steele said with a cold smile. "A prison planet where the restoration has allowed the indigenous predator species to break containment. The guards and inmates are trapped together in the facilities, while creatures that were supposed to be extinct are reclaiming the world. Save them without disrupting either the restoration or the prison security, and we'll talk." Daniel's heart sank. It was worse than impossible, it was a moral minefield. Save the guards who might be corrupt, save the inmates who might be dangerous. Let the restoration continue, even if it meant people would die. "We accept," Neva said before Daniel could object. The Coalition fleet pulled back slightly, giving them room to depart but maintaining a loose perimeter. As the vault station began to move toward Ferox 6, Daniel turned to Neva. "Why did you accept it's impossible?" "Nothing is impossible," she replied, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. "We chose to heal 1,000 worlds. Remember? We don't get to pick only the easy ones. As they traveled through hyperspace, they studied everything available about Ferox 6. It was a nightmare, a world deliberately kept hostile to prevent escape, where the worst criminals from 50 systems were sent to mine, in conditions that killed most within 5 years. The restoration had awakened something in the planet's biosphere, something aggressive and hungry. The original ecosystem was suppressed using targeted toxins. Harper reported. The restoration neutralized those toxins, and now we're seeing explosive growth of previously dormant species. Most of them are carnivorous, and they've had 1,000,000 years of evolution storing up energy for this moment. Can we selectively restore? Daniel asked. Leave some areas toxic to maintain the barriers. That would go against the core principle of the restoration, Neva said. We'd be choosing to maintain suffering for the sake of control. Then we need another solution. They dropped out of hyperspace to find Ferox 6 in chaos. The planet's surface was a writhing mass of vegetation, with structures barely visible beneath the green. Emergency beacons flashed from dozens of locations, guards and prisoners alike calling for help that wouldn't come. The Coalition is watching, Harper reminded them. Whatever you do here will determine whether you have 300 worlds as allies or enemies. Daniel stared at the troubled world below, feeling the weight of every life hanging in the balance. Beside him, Neva placed a hand on his shoulder. Remember, she said softly, we're not just fixing things. We're helping them transform. The prison doesn't have to remain a prison. The guards don't have to remain guards. Even the predators don't have to remain mere predators. You're suggesting we transform the entire social structure of a prison planet. I'm suggesting, she said with a slight smile, that we give them the same choice the Vault gave us. One miracle, or 1,000 small hopes. Daniel felt understanding dawn. They couldn't save Ferox 6 by maintaining what it was. They had to help it become something entirely new. Harper, open a channel to every emergency beacon on the planet simultaneously. That's going to be chaotic. Do it. The view screen, filled with faces human and alien, guard and prisoner, all united in their desperation. Daniel took a breath and began to speak. This is Daniel Cross and Neva Rahl from the Vault Station. We're here to help, but not in the way you expect. Ferox 6 is transforming. You can transform with it, or you can die fighting to maintain a system that's already gone. In 1 hour, we'll begin targeted interventions. Work together, guards and inmates, or face the restoration alone. Your choice. He cut the communication and turned to Neva. Think they'll listen? Some will. That's all we need, some people choosing to change. The rest will follow when they see it working. They began their work, using the Vault Station's sensors to identify locations where cooperation was beginning. A guard captain who'd organized inmates to build barriers against the encroaching jungle. A group of prisoners who'd rescued trapped guards from a collapsed structure. Small acts of unity in the face of larger chaos. To these groups, they sent help. Energy barriers that could hold back the aggressive flora without killing it. Medical supplies that worked on multiple species. Information about which plants were edible, which could be cultivated, which could be used as natural barriers against the predators. But the real transformation came when they discovered something unexpected in the restoration itself. The predator species, Harper announced, excitement creeping into his synthesized voice. They're not just mindlessly aggressive. They're showing signs of complex intelligence, problem-solving, communication, even what might be tool use. Daniel and Neva exchanged glances. An intelligent species, suppressed for millions of years, suddenly free. It changed everything. Can we communicate with them? Daniel asked. Not directly, but we can try something else. Neva moved to the Vault interface, her fingers dancing over controls that reformed themselves to match her intentions. The restoration wave carries information, genetic memories. If these creatures were intelligent before the suppression, that intelligence is being restored too. She sent a pulse of energy toward the planet, not to change anything physically, but to accelerate the restoration of neural pathways in the predator species. Within hours, the attacks on human settlements decreased. The creatures were still dangerous, still predatory, but they were also curious, cautious, capable of recognition. A breakthrough came when a young inmate, barely out of his teens, managed to establish basic communication with one of the creatures using light patterns. Within a day, crude negotiations were beginning. Territory boundaries were established. Resources were shared. The Coalition watched it all, their fleet maintaining its vigilant perimeter. As the situation on Ferox 6 stabilized, not perfectly, not without ongoing challenges, but with hope, Elder Thane requested another communication. "You didn't save them," she observed. "You changed them." "Saving them would have been temporary," Daniel replied. "Change can be permanent. And if they didn't want to change, then they had the freedom to refuse," Neva said. "Some did. They're still fighting to maintain the old ways. But most chose adaptation over extinction." Steele's scarred face appeared on another screen. "This doesn't solve our grievances. Our worlds are still in chaos." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "But chaos can lead to growth. We're offering to help guide that growth, not control it. Work with us, and we can minimize the disruption while maximizing the benefits. Fight us, and you're fighting the restoration itself." The Coalition members debated for hours. Daniel and Neva waited, watching as Ferox 6 continued its transformation below. Former guards and inmates were building together now, creating something that was neither prison nor colony, but something entirely new. The indigenous intelligences were part of it, no longer enemies but neighbors with their own needs and contributions. Finally, Elder Thane spoke for the Coalition. "We propose a partnership. You two will continue to guide the restoration, but with advisory councils from affected worlds. Major decisions will require consensus, and you will train others to understand and work with the Vault systems. So this power doesn't rest in only two pairs of hands." Daniel felt relief flood through him. "We accept, but," Steele added, his expression still hostile, "we'll be watching. One sign that you're abusing this power, one indication that you're playing gods rather than guides, and the Coalition will act." "Understood," Neva said formally. As the Coalition fleet began to disperse, returning to their worlds with news of the agreement, Daniel slumped in his chair. The weight of what they'd taken on was staggering. 300 worlds, each with unique challenges, each requiring careful guidance through transformation. "Regrets?" Neva asked, sitting beside him. "No," Daniel said after a moment. "Just awareness. We wanted to fix things, to heal damage. But healing is never simple. Is it? The worthwhile things never are." She took his hand, and for a moment, the light flowed between them again, warm, comforting, a reminder of their connection. "But we don't have to do it alone." Harper's voice interrupted the moment. "I hate to break up this touching scene, but we have approximately 297 more worlds showing various stages of restoration crisis. Shall I prioritize by severity of situation or proximity to Coalition members who might throw another tantrum?" Daniel laughed, surprising himself. "Severity, Harper. Always severity." "Also," the AI added, "you might want to look at the long-range sensors. We have visitors approaching, not Coalition, not Crixin, something else." On the screen, a ship appeared unlike anything in their databases. It was organic, but not like Crixin vessels. This was something that had grown rather than been built. Its hull, covered in patterns that reminded Daniel uncomfortably of the Vault symbols. "First expansion," Neva breathed. "Their first expansion survivors." The implications hit Daniel like a physical blow. Survivors from the era when humans and Vayrith had built the Vault. People who might actually understand the technology they were working with, or who might want it back. Open communications, Daniel said, straightening in his chair. Let's find out if we're about to make new friends or very old enemies. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that was neither fully human nor fully Varith, but something in between, tall, graceful, with features that suggested both species ancestry. Greetings, inheritors, the figure said in a voice like singing. We are the forgotten, the ones who chose exile rather than separation. We have waited so long for someone to activate the vault correctly. You chose the 1,000 hopes over the single miracle. That gives us hope that perhaps, finally, the wounds of the past can truly heal. Daniel and Neva exchanged glances. Their mission had just become far more complex. The forgotten ship docked with the vault station like a flower opening to the sun, organic tendrils interweaving with the crystalline structure in ways that suggested they were always meant to connect. Daniel watched the process with fascination, his engineer's mind trying to understand technology that seemed to exist at the intersection of biology and quantum mechanics. Their ship is singing, Neva said softly, her head tilted, as if listening to something beyond normal hearing. Can you feel it? Daniel concentrated. And yes, there it was, a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the vault itself, through their bones, through the connection they shared. It was hauntingly beautiful and somehow sad. The airlock dilated, rather than opened, and 3 figures stepped through. The one who had spoken on the screen led them, tall, graceful, with skin that seemed to shift between human pink and Varith bronze depending on the angle of light. Behind them came 2 others, one more human in appearance, one more Varith, but both carrying that same sense of being between worlds. I am Synthesis, the leader said, and Daniel realized it wasn't a name, but a description. These are my companions, memory and purpose. We have waited so long for this moment. You're hybrids, Daniel said, then immediately worried he'd been offensive. I mean, we are what we chose to become. Synthesis replied with what might have been a smile. When the separation war ended and our peoples chose isolation from each other, some of us chose a different path. We merged, genetically and culturally, trying to preserve what had been built together. Memory stepped forward, more human in features but with Varith eyes. The vault was our greatest achievement, but also our greatest failure. We built it to heal the wounds of war, but the war ended before it could be properly deployed. Both sides feared what it might do, what it might reveal about the costs of separation. So you went into exile, Neva said, understanding dawning in her expression. You took the knowledge with you. We tried to preserve it, Purpose added, their voice carrying Varith harmonics. But time is cruel even to those who extend their lives through genetic manipulation. We are the last of the forgotten. When we detected the vault's activation, we hoped someone had finally chosen correctly. The 1,000 hopes, Daniel said. You knew about that choice. Synthesis moved to the vault station's central interface, their hand hovering over, but not touching the controls. We programmed it, a test of wisdom over power. You passed, but now comes the harder test, living with the consequences. As if summoned by their words, alerts began flooding the station's systems. Harper's voice filled the command center. We have situations developing on multiple worlds. The restoration is accelerating in some places, mutating in others. It's as if the wave is encountering resistance and adapting. On the main screen, images flashed by a world where the restoration had triggered volcanic activity as the planet's core responded to surface changes. Another, where restored forests were growing so fast they were consuming cities. A third, where the cleaning of the oceans had awakened something massive and ancient beneath the waves. This is what we feared, Memory said quietly. The restoration was designed for a universe that no longer exists. Evolution, adaptation, Even sapient intervention have changed these worlds in ways we couldn't predict. Daniel felt a cold weight in his stomach. We're making things worse. No, Purpose said firmly. You're making things different. Worse and better are judgments that depend on perspective. The question is whether you can guide the process or merely witness it. The coalition won't see it that way, Neva pointed out. Steele is already looking for reasons to take control. If worlds start dying because of the restoration. She was cut off by an incoming transmission. Marcus Steele's scarred face appeared, and he wasn't alone. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of worlds, including Elder Thane, but their expressions were uniformly grim. Cross, Rahl, Steele began without preamble. The situation has changed. Corva 9's restoration has triggered a chain reaction in their 3 suns. The entire system could go nova within days. 8 billion lives are at risk. Fix it, or we're taking action. What kind of action? Daniel demanded. We've been developing a virus. Another coalition member said an insectoid being whose name Daniel couldn't pronounce. Something that will shut down the vault permanently. We'd prefer not to use it. But a virus won't work. Synthesis interrupted, stepping into view. The coalition members recoiled visibly. The vault exists partially outside normal space-time. You'd need something far more sophisticated. Forgotten, Elder Thane breathed. You still exist. Barely, Synthesis replied. But we exist enough to offer assistance, if you'll accept it. Steele's face contorted with suspicion. Why should we trust beings who abandoned the galaxy to its fate? Because, Memory said, moving forward. We understand the vault in ways these two cannot, despite their connection to it. We help design the restoration protocols. We can help modify them. Daniel looked at Neva, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her amber eyes. They were being offered help. But at what cost? The Forgotten had knowledge. But they also had their own agenda, their own vision of what the galaxy should become. Corva 9 first, Daniel said, making a command decision. We save those 8 billion lives. Then we discuss long-term solutions. Agreed, Steele said grudgingly. You have 48 hours. The transmission ended, and Daniel immediately turned to the Forgotten. Can you help us? We can, Purpose said. But you need to understand something first. The restoration wave isn't just healing physical damage. It's trying to restore these worlds to their theoretical optimal states. For Corva 9, with its 3 suns, that optimal state might be something the current inhabitants can't survive. Then we convince it otherwise, Neva said. The vault responds to us. We can guide its interpretation of optimal. It's not that simple, Synthesis warned. The more you try to control the restoration, the more it will resist. It was designed to be independent, to prevent exactly the kind of manipulation the coalition wants. Daniel ran his hands through his hair in frustration. So we can't control it, but we have to guide it. We can't stop it, but we have to save planets from it. This is impossible. No, Memory said gently. It's complex. There's a difference. They spent the next 6 hours in preparation. With the Forgotten teaching Daniel and Neva subtleties of vault control they hadn't imagined. It wasn't about commanding the restoration, but about communicating with it, offering suggestions rather than demands, providing context rather than constraints. Think of it as a conversation with a very powerful child, Purpose explained. It wants to help, but it doesn't fully understand the consequences of its actions. You need to teach it, not control it. When they arrived at Corva 9, the situation was worse than the report suggested. The 3 suns were pulsing in synchronization, their magnetic fields interacting in ways that shouldn't be possible. The restoration had somehow awakened a resonance between them, and the energy building up was beyond catastrophic. The planet's original state, Harper reported, analyzing historical data the Forgotten had provided, was as part of a binary system. The third sun was captured later, about 2 million years ago. The restoration is trying to eject it. Eject a sun? Daniel stared at the readings in disbelief. That would destroy every planet in the system. Unless, Synthesis said thoughtfully, we can convince the restoration that the three-sun system is the optimal state. Show it how life has adapted to this configuration, how the complex gravitational interactions have created unique evolutionary paths. Neva was already at the vault interface, her hands glowing as she connected with the system. I can feel it, the restoration's confusion. It sees the third sun as damage, an intrusion that needs to be corrected. Daniel joined her, their combined light filling the command center. Together, they dove into the restoration's awareness, and what they found there staggered them. It wasn't a program or a force, it was something almost alive. A collective consciousness made from the genetic memories of millions of species, the echo of worlds that had been lost in the ancient war. It was trying to rebuild based on those memories, not understanding that the galaxy had moved on, evolved, become something new. We need to update its understanding, Daniel said, though speech wasn't quite the right word for how they were communicating. Show it what Corva 9 has become, not what it was. They opened their minds to the restoration, sharing images and sensations from the world below. The triple sunrise that the inhabitants considered sacred. The unique agriculture that depended on the complex light patterns. The sea creatures that navigated by the interaction of 3 different solar winds. But the restoration resisted. Its memories of the original binary system were strong, insistent. The damage had to be corrected. The intrusion had to be removed. It's not working, Neva said, strain visible on her face even in the light that surrounded them. Because you're fighting it, Memory said, moving to stand between them. Stop trying to convince it and start trying to understand it. Why does it see the third sun as damage? Daniel forced himself to stop pushing and start listening. Deep in the restoration's consciousness, he found the answer, a memory of war, of a weapon that moved suns, that destroyed entire systems by disrupting their gravitational balance. The third sun of Corva 9 bore signatures similar to that ancient weapon. The restoration saw it as a wound from that war, something that needed to be healed. It's not damage, Daniel said, projecting the thought as clearly as he could. It's growth. The system adapted, evolved, became something stronger because of the challenge. That's what healing really means, not returning to what was, but becoming what you're meant to be. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, slowly, the resonance between the suns began to shift. Instead of building toward destruction, it began to stabilize into a new pattern, still complex, still powerful, but sustainable. It's working, Harper announced. The suns are finding a new equilibrium. Energy output is actually increasing, but in a stable pattern. The planets are going to get more light and heat, but within survivable parameters. Daniel and Neva pulled back from the interface, exhausted. The light faded from their skin, but the connection between them felt stronger than ever. He could sense her exhaustion, her relief, and something else, pride, perhaps, in what they'd accomplished together. Impressive, Synthesis said. You didn't overpower the restoration or trick it. You taught it. That's the key to everything that comes next. A communication request came through from Corva 9's surface. The planetary governor appeared on screen, tears streaming down her face. The suns, she said, voice choked with emotion. They're singing, all 3 of them, in harmony. Our scientists say the energy output will transform our world, make it a paradise within a generation. How did you do this? We listened, Daniel said simply. The restoration isn't our enemy. It's just confused, working with outdated information. We're helping it learn. The governor nodded, then surprised them by bowing deeply. The coalition was wrong about you. You're not playing gods. You're playing teachers. After the transmission ended, Steele contacted them again. His expression was unreadable, the scarred portion of his face as immobile as ever. Corva 9 is celebrating, he said flatly. But this doesn't solve the larger problem. You can't be everywhere at once. You can't teach the restoration about every world simultaneously. No, Daniel agreed. We can't. But we can teach others to do what we do. Impossible. The genetic lock isn't absolute, Purpose interrupted. It's strong, yes. But the vault was designed to eventually accept multiple operators. These two are the keys. But keys can open doors for others to walk through. Elder Thane leaned forward in the transmission. You're proposing to train restoration guides, people who could help manage the process on individual worlds. More than that, Neva said, an idea clearly forming. We're proposing to create a network. The restoration is a collective consciousness. It can learn from multiple sources simultaneously. If we had guides on every affected world, people who understood their own planet's needs and could communicate them to the restoration. It would be like having thousands of teachers instead of just two, Daniel finished. Steele was quiet for a long moment. And who would choose these guides? Who would train them? Who would ensure they don't abuse this power? The Coalition would help choose them, Daniel said. The Forgotten would help train them. And as for preventing abuse, the restoration itself would be the safeguard. It's learning to recognize genuine need versus selfish desire. Try to use it for personal gain, and it simply won't respond. You're asking us to trust not just you, but a force that nearly destroyed Corva 9, Steele pointed out. We're asking you to be part of the solution instead of fighting against it, Neva countered. The restoration is happening whether we guide it or not. Would you rather have thousands of people working to help it understand each world's needs, or just the two of us trying to manage everything? The Coalition members discussed among themselves for nearly an hour. Daniel and Neva waited, exhausted but hopeful. The Forgotten stood with them, patient as only beings who had waited millennia could be. Finally, Elder Thane spoke for the group. We'll try it. A pilot program, 20 worlds. Selected guides trained by you and the Forgotten. If it works, we expand. If it fails. It won't fail, Daniel said with more confidence than he felt. As the Coalition signed off to begin selecting candidates, Synthesis approached Daniel and Neva. You've taken the first real step towards something we never achieved: true cooperation between restoration and civilization. But there's something you need to know. They gestured to the main viewer, where a star chart appeared showing the spread of the restoration wave. It's not random. The wave is following specific patterns, moving towards something. Can you see it? Daniel studied the pattern, his mind automatically calculating trajectories and intersections. Then he saw it all. The paths converged on a single point, a sector of space that showed as empty on their charts. What's there? Neva asked. The origin, Memory said quietly. The first world, where humans and Vayrith first achieved spaceflight together, where the Alliance was born, where the Vault was conceived. It was thought destroyed in the war. But if the restoration is heading there, it might be trying to restore it, Daniel finished, feeling a chill run through him. A world that both our species consider mythical, suddenly returned. That could unite us or start another war. Which is why, Purpose said, you two need to be there when it happens. The restored origin will respond to you more than anyone else. You could shape what it becomes: a monument to the past, or a foundation for the future. Daniel looked at Neva, seeing his own mixture of excitement and fear reflected in her eyes. They'd started this journey trying to save a single station, and now they were potentially about to resurrect the most important world in human Vayrith history. When he asked, based on the wave's current speed, about 3 months, Harper calculated. Just enough time to establish your guide network and probably cause several more interstellar incidents. Then we'd better get started, Neva said. fatigue temporarily forgotten in the face of this new challenge. As they began planning the training program with the Forgotten, Daniel found himself watching Neva work. The way she moved, the way she thought, the way she could see solutions he missed and vice versa. They really had become partners in every sense. The life debt that had bound them initially had transformed into something deeper, stronger. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" "No," Daniel said, smiling. "Something's finally right." The work ahead was staggering. 20 worlds to visit, guides to train, a restoration to teach, and ultimately, a mythical world to face. But standing there with Neva, with the Forgotten offering their knowledge, and even the Coalition beginning to cooperate, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since this all began. Hope. The restoration had started as a crisis, nearly become a catastrophe, but it was transforming into something else, an opportunity for the galaxy to heal, not just physically, but socially, politically, even spiritually. The wounds of ancient wars could finally close. The divisions between species could begin to bridge, all because a maintenance engineer had chosen to save a warrior who wasn't supposed to be saved. And that warrior had chosen to trust someone her culture said she should command. "Harper," Daniel called out. "Send a message to Earth and to the Varith homeworld. Tell them about the origin, about what's coming. They should hear it from us, not through rumors." "Crafting a message that won't cause mass panic or religious warfare," the AI replied. "This should be interesting." As the Vault Station adjusted course toward their first training world, Daniel took Neva's hand. The light flowed between them, warm and familiar now. 3 months, he said. "Think we can teach the galaxy to heal itself by then?" "We taught a restoration wave that 3 suns could sing together," she replied. "After that, anything seems possible." Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, but something had changed. The restoration wave spread between them, like a promise, touching dead worlds with the possibility of life, bringing hope to places that had known only despair. And at the center of it all, 2 unlikely partners, a human engineer and a Varith warrior, guided the process, with hands joined and purposes united, proving that sometimes the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand together. The real test was still ahead: the origin, the guides, the challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time since he'd pulled Neva from that collapsing ceiling, Daniel wasn't facing the future with fear. He was facing it with anticipation. The training facility materialized around them, like a dream becoming solid. The Vault Station had reconfigured an entire section of itself into a perfect simulation environment. Walls that could project any world's conditions. Gravity that could be adjusted to match different planets. Even atmospheric compositions that could change with a thought. Daniel watched as the first group of potential guides entered. 20 beings from 20 worlds, each chosen by their respective governments and vetted by the Coalition. Some were scientists, others were spiritual leaders. A few were simply individuals who had shown unusual sensitivity to the restoration's effects on their homeworlds. "They're terrified," Neva observed quietly, standing beside him on the observation platform. "Can you blame them?" Daniel replied. "We're asking them to connect with a force that nearly destroyed some of their worlds." Among the candidates, one stood out immediately, a young woman from Kepler's Haven, whose entire left arm appeared to be made of living crystal. She moved with careful precision, as if afraid she might shatter something or someone. "That's Arya Moss," Memory explained, joining them on the platform. The restoration transformed her when it hit her world. She was dying from radiation exposure, and the wave didn't just heal her, it changed her into something new. "A bridge," Synthesis added, appearing at Memory's side. "She's naturally attuned to the restoration's frequency. She'll be your strongest student, but also your most dangerous." "Dangerous, how?" Neva asked. "Because she doesn't just communicate with the restoration," Purpose said. completing the trio. She embodies it. If she loses control, she could trigger a localized wave that would transform everything within a kilometer radius. Daniel felt the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. They weren't just teaching these people to guide the restoration, they were potentially creating weapons, whether they intended to or not. "Let's begin," he said, stepping forward to address the candidates. The first lesson was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution. Each candidate had to learn to quiet their own thoughts enough to sense the restoration's presence. For some, like Arya, it came naturally. She closed her crystalline eyes and immediately began to glow with a soft inner light. For others, it was like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane. "Don't force it," Neva instructed a Thraxian whose 6 arms were twitching with frustration. "The restoration isn't something you grab, it's something you invite." Days blended into weeks as they worked with each candidate individually. Daniel found himself drawn to an older man named Thomas Reed from Mars, whose background as a terraforming engineer gave him an intuitive understanding of planetary systems. "It's like the old hydroponic gardens," Reed mused during one session. "You can't make plants grow. You can only create the conditions where growth is possible." "Exactly," Daniel encouraged him. "The restoration works the same way. We're not commanding it. We're creating conditions where it can do what it naturally wants to do." But not all the candidates were progressing. A military commander from Sparta Station approached every exercise like a battle to be won, trying to dominate the restoration rather than communicate with it. A mystic from the outer rings kept trying to worship it, placing it so far above herself that she couldn't establish any meaningful connection. It was Arya who surprised them all. During a particularly intense session, where they were teaching the candidates to sense the restoration's emotional resonance, yes, it had something like emotions, she suddenly screamed. Her crystalline arm flared with blinding light, and waves of transformation energy pulsed outward. Daniel and Neva reacted instantly, their combined light bond activating to contain the wave. But Arya wasn't losing control, she was receiving something. "It's afraid," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "The restoration. It's afraid of what's coming." "What's coming?" Neva demanded, still maintaining the containment field. "The origin," Arya whispered. "It doesn't want to go there. There's something wrong, something that shouldn't be awakened." The Forgotten exchanged glances that Daniel couldn't read. Synthesis stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Arya's shoulder. The crystal woman's glow gradually subsided. "What does the restoration know about origin that we don't?" Daniel asked. "Perhaps," memory said carefully. "It remembers what we've chosen to forget. The origin wasn't just destroyed in the war. It was transformed into something else. Something that both sides agreed should remain buried." Before they could pursue this further, alarms erupted throughout the station. Harper's voice filled the space with unusual urgency. "We have a problem. A big, Crixin-shaped problem. A massive fleet just emerged from hyperspace. And they're not here to talk." The main viewer activated, showing hundreds of Crixin bioships surrounding them. But these weren't the same vessels they'd faced before. These had been modified, augmented with technology that looked disturbingly familiar. "That's vault technology," Purpose said, their voice tight with concern. "They've been harvesting pieces of the restoration wave, studying it, adapting it." A communication channel opened, and Daniel found himself facing not the insectoid Crixin commander he expected, but something far worse. The creature on the screen had once been Crixin, but now it was something else, a fusion of organic and crystalline components that echoed the vault's own structure. "We are evolved," it spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made Daniel's teeth ache. "The restoration you unleashed taught us that transformation is power. We have embraced it, controlled it, weaponized it as you never could." "You've corrupted it," Neva said, stepping forward. "The restoration isn't meant to be a weapon." "Everything is a weapon to those with the will to use it," The evolved Crixin replied. You showed us the path when you used it to strip us of our mechanical enhancements. We simply took the lesson further. The creature gestured, and Daniel saw what they'd come for the 20 guide candidates. All of them sensitive to the restoration. All of them potential tools in the wrong hands. Surrender the candidates to us, the Crixin commanded. We will use them to direct the restoration properly, toward strength, toward dominance, toward the evolution of the worthy, and the elimination of the weak. Never, Daniel said flatly. Then we will take them. The Crixin fleet attacked simultaneously, but their weapons were different now. Instead of plasma and projectiles, they fired concentrated bursts of corrupted restoration energy. Where they hit, the vault station's crystalline structure began to twist and mutate. They're trying to reprogram the station, Harper announced. Turn it into something they can control. Daniel and Neva rushed to the main interface, their combined light flaring as they connected with the vault's consciousness. But something was wrong. The restoration wasn't responding properly. It was confused, conflicted, pulled between its original purpose and the corrupted signals the Crixin were broadcasting. We need more connections, Daniel realized. The restoration needs to hear from more than just us. He turned to the candidates, who were watching in a mixture of fear and determination. This is your first real test, he told them. Not a simulation, not a controlled exercise. The restoration needs to understand that what the Crixin are doing is wrong. It needs to hear that from all of you. Thomas Reed was the first to step forward, placing his weathered hand on the interface. I've spent my life making dead worlds livable. I won't let them turn living worlds dead. Arya joined him, her crystalline arm resonating with the station's structure. One by one, the other candidates added their voices to the chorus, not speaking aloud, but projecting their thoughts, their hopes, their determination into the restoration's consciousness. The effect was immediate. The corrupted sections of the station began to heal, the twisted crystalline structures returning to their original forms. The restoration was learning, understanding the difference between forced evolution and natural growth. But the Crixin weren't giving up. Their evolved commander appeared on screen again, and this time Daniel could see more of its transformed body. It had merged itself with parts of salvaged vault technology, becoming a hybrid abomination. If we cannot control the restoration, it said, then we will consume it. The lead Crixin ship began to change, its biomechanical hull opening like a flower made of teeth and circuitry. Inside, Daniel could see a corrupted fragment of the original vault, twisted into something hungry and wrong. They made their own vault, Synthesis breathed in horror. A dark mirror of the original. The corrupted vault began to pulse, sending out its own wave not of restoration, but of consumption, breaking down matter and energy to fuel its own growth. Where it touched the station's shields, they didn't just fail, they were devoured, converted into more corrupted vault material. We need to evacuate, Memory urged. That thing will consume the entire station. No, Neva said firmly. If we run, it follows. If it reaches inhabited worlds. She didn't need to finish. A corrupted vault that consumed rather than restored would be a plague across the galaxy. Daniel's mind raced through possibilities, then stopped on one insane idea. The origin. The restoration is afraid of it. But maybe that's what we need, something that scares even the Crixin. You want to accelerate the wave. Purpose understood. Force the restoration to reach origin now, before we're ready. It's suicide, Harper protested. We don't know what's waiting there. We know what's here, Daniel countered. A corrupted vault that will devour everything. Maybe origin is dangerous, but it's a danger the original restoration knows about. It might be our only chance. Neva looked at him, and in her amber eyes, he saw trust absolute. Do it. They joined hands over the interface, and together, they did something the Forgotten had warned them never to do. They didn't guide the restoration or teach it. They commanded it. The response was violent. The vault station shuddered as every system activated at once. The restoration wave, which had been spreading gradually across the galaxy, suddenly contracted and focused into a single, impossibly dense beam of energy that shot toward a sector of empty space. "Wave acceleration at 3,000%, Harper reported, his voice distorted by the massive energy discharge. 4,000, 5,000. I'm losing the ability to measure it." The beam struck something in the empty sector, and space itself seemed to scream. Reality twisted, and where there had been nothing, something began to emerge: a planet. But not just any planet. Origin materialized like a nightmare becoming real. It was massive, easily 3 times Earth's size. But that wasn't what made Daniel's blood freeze. The planet was covered in a crystalline shell, similar to the vault. But this crystal was dark, almost black, shot through with veins of sickly light. And it was alive. Not just inhabited, the planet itself was alive, aware, and angry at being awakened. The corrupted Crixon vault immediately turned toward it, drawn like iron to a magnet. But as the consumption wave touched Origin's surface, something impossible happened. Origin consumed the consumer, absorbed the corrupted vault into itself without effort. The Crixon commander's scream of rage turned to terror. "What have you done?" "What we had to," Daniel replied, though he wasn't sure if that was true. Origin pulsed, and a wave of its own spread outward, not restoration, not consumption, but something else. Where it touched the Crixon ships, they froze in place, locked in crystalline shells that looked like dark mirrors of the vault's material. A voice spoke then, not through communications but directly into their minds. It was ancient, vast, and utterly inhuman despite speaking perfect English and Vayrith simultaneously. "Who dares wake the sealed god?" The Forgotten fell to their knees as one, and Daniel heard memory whisper, "We're sorry, we're so sorry." "The war never ended," the voice continued. "It was only paused. The Origin was not destroyed. It was transformed into a prison for the one who started it all. The first being to achieve transcendence through technology. The one who promised godhood to both species and delivered only madness." Images flooded their minds: the glory days of human Vayrith cooperation, the discovery of consciousness-expanding technology, the first volunteer who merged with it and became something beyond mortal understanding. And then the horror, as that being decided, that all life should be forcibly evolved, transformed, made perfect according to its alien definition of perfection. "The war you know about was just the end," Origin's voice explained. "The real war was against the transcendent. Both species united to stop it, to seal it here, to bury the Origin so deep that it would be forgotten. But you've awakened it. You've given it the restoration to play with." Daniel felt Neva's hand tighten in his. Around them, the guide candidates stood frozen in terror. Only Arya seemed unaffected, her crystalline form resonating with Origin's frequency. "But," Arya said, stepping forward, "you're not the transcendent. You're the prison. You're Origin itself. Aren't you the planet that became aware to keep the prisoner contained?" There was silence. Then, something that might have been approval in the vast voice. "Clever little bridge. Yes. I am the jailer, and I am the jail. For eons, I have held the transcendent in check. But the restoration has given it new strength. It stirs. It dreams of transformation again." "Then, we'll help you," Daniel said, finding his voice. "The restoration doesn't have to strengthen the transcendent. We've learned to guide it, to teach it. Maybe we can teach it to reinforce your prison instead." "Or," Origin mused, "I could simply consume you all. End the threat by ending those who could free the prisoner." The crystalline shell around the Crixon ships began to tighten. Daniel could hear their panic over still open communication channels. But it was the evolved commander who spoke, its voice stripped of arrogance. "Please," it begged. "We didn't know. We only wanted to be strong. Strength without wisdom. Origin replied, the same mistake that created the transcendent. Very well. I will test you, all of you. If you can prove that you've learned from the past, that you can wield the restoration without becoming what you fight, then perhaps there is hope. The space around them shifted, and suddenly, they weren't on the vault station anymore. They stood on Origin's surface, but not as it had been before the transformation. It was paradise, cities of crystal and living wood where humans and Varith lived in harmony, where technology and nature were one. This is your test, Origin said. The Transcendent will try to corrupt this memory, turn it into its vision of perfection. You must maintain the balance. Keep the restoration true to its purpose, not let it become a tool of forced evolution. Fail, and I consume everything to prevent the Transcendent's escape. Succeed, and I will teach you what you need to know to truly heal the galaxy. Daniel looked at Neva, at the Forgotten, at the guide candidates, even at the evolved Crixan commander, who had somehow been transported with them. Together, he asked. Together, Neva confirmed. As one, they reached for the restoration, and the real battle began. The memory of Origin was more real than reality itself. Daniel could feel the warm breeze carrying scents of flowers that had been extinct for millennia, could hear the harmony of human and Varith voices in the crystal cities that rose like organic sculptures from the living ground. This was paradise before the fall, and somewhere within it, the Transcendent was trying to wake. Stay close, Neva whispered, her hand finding his as they stood in the central plaza of what had once been Origin's capital. Around them, the other members of their unlikely alliance formed a defensive circle, the 20 guide candidates, the 3 Forgotten, and even the evolved Crixan commander, its corrupted form looking out of place in this pristine memory. It's starting, Arya said, her crystalline arm pulsing with warning light. I can feel the Transcendent pushing against the memory, trying to reshape it. She was right. The perfect harmony of the city was beginning to shift. The crystal buildings started growing taller, sharper, their organic curves becoming geometric perfection. The citizens walking past were changing too, their movements becoming synchronized, their faces losing individual expression, becoming identical masks of serene emptiness. This is its vision, memory said, horror in their voice. Perfect order, perfect unity, but no soul, no choice, no life as we understand it. Then we show it another way, Daniel said, reaching for the restoration through his connection with Neva. Together, they pushed back against the changes, not with force, but with memories of their own, the chaos of the mining station, the desperate courage of guards and prisoners working together on Ferox 6, the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of life as it actually was. The restoration responded, but it was confused, pulled between the Transcendent's vision of perfection and their insistence on imperfection's value. The city around them flickered, oscillating between sterile paradise and vibrant chaos. We need more voices, Thomas Reed said, stepping forward. The old terraformer placed his weathered hands on the crystalline ground and began to project his own memories, Mars, before and after terraforming. The slow, patient work of making a dead world live. The setbacks and failures that made the successes meaningful. One by one, the other guides added their voices. Each brought their own perspective, their own understanding of what growth and healing really meant. The Thraxian showed how his 6-armed people had learned to build in 3 dimensions, creating cities that were mazes to others, but poetry to them. The mystic from the outer rings shared the meditation chambers where silence taught more than words ever could. Even the evolved Crixan commander, after a moment's hesitation, contributed. Its memories were harsh, the desperate struggle for survival on worlds where only the strongest lived, but also the moment when strength meant protecting the weak hive members, when evolution meant more than just personal power. The Transcendent, fought back. The memory shifted violently, and suddenly, they weren't in the city anymore, but in a vast laboratory where the first consciousness transfer had taken place. They could see it happening, a human volunteer, young and idealistic, stepping into a machine that would expand their consciousness beyond mortal limits. "I remember this," Synthesis said quietly. "I was there. Or rather, my ancestors were. We thought we were opening the next chapter of evolution." The machine activated in the memory, and they watched the volunteer transform. At first, it was beautiful, their mind expanding, touching every network, every system, understanding flowing through them like water. But then came the horror. The volunteer's face twisted as they realized they could feel every flaw in every living being, every imperfection that needed correction. "I can fix them all," the memory volunteer said, and their voice carried the same harmonics as Origin itself. "I can make everything perfect." "But perfection is death," Arya said suddenly, stepping toward the memory. Her crystalline arm reached out, and she touched the image of the transforming volunteer. "I learned that when the restoration changed me, at first, I wanted to spread it, to make everyone like me, crystalline and pure. But then I realized if everyone was like me, there would be no me. Diversity isn't a flaw. It's the point." The memory wavered, and for a moment, Daniel saw through it to something deeper, the actual transcendent, imprisoned in layers of crystallized time and space. It wasn't the godlike being he'd expected, but something sadder, lonelier. It was a consciousness that had expanded so far, it had lost all connection to what it had been, trapped forever in its own definition of perfection. "It's not evil," Neva said, understanding flooding her voice. "It's lost. It's been alone for so long. It's forgotten what connection feels like." "Dangerous sympathy." Origin's voice rumbled through the memory. The transcendent nearly destroyed 2 civilizations with its compassion, its desire to help by forcing evolution. "But what if we could teach it another way?" Daniel asked. "Not force it back into prison, but show it how to connect without consuming." The memory shattered around them like glass, and they found themselves in a space between spaces, not Origin's surface, not the laboratory, but somewhere that existed in the intersection of thought and reality. The transcendent was there, not as a physical form, but as a presence that pressed against their minds. "You would teach me." Its voice was multitudes, every being it had ever tried to forcibly evolve, speaking in unison. "I who have touched the infinite, I who understand the mathematical perfection of consciousness itself." "We'd teach you what you've forgotten," Daniel said, stepping forward with Neva still at his side. "How to be small, how to be imperfect, how to be human, or Varith, or Crixin, or any of the beautiful, flawed, struggling forms life takes." "Show me," the transcendent demanded. And suddenly Daniel felt it pressing into his mind, trying to understand through forced connection. The invasion should have been overwhelming, but Daniel didn't fight it. Instead, he remembered fixing the air filter on the mining station, such a simple task, so far beneath a transcendent being's notice, but essential for survival. He remembered the satisfaction of making something work, the frustration when it broke again, the determination to keep trying. Neva added her memories training as a warrior, failing repeatedly before succeeding, the shame of falling in battle and the unexpected gift of being saved. She showed the transcendent how weakness had led to strength, how accepting help had created bonds stronger than any forced unity. The guide candidates joined in, each offering their own small, imperfect memories. Arya showed the pain of transformation and the choice to remain connected to others despite it. Reed shared the tedium of watching plants grow, season after season, and finding meaning in that patience. Even the Crixin commander, struggling with its corrupted form, offered something precious, The memory of choosing to become something new. Not because it was forced, but because it wanted to be more than what it was. "This is chaos," the Transcendent protested. But there was something different in its voice. Uncertainty. Interest. "There's no pattern, no perfection, no end goal." "That's the point," the Forgotten said in unison. Synthesis, memory, and purpose speaking as one. "We tried to preserve the old ways, the perfect cooperation. But we were wrong. The chaos, the imperfection, the constant struggle, that's what makes life worth living." The space around them began to change. The crystalline prison that held the Transcendent wasn't breaking. It was becoming permeable, allowing connection without release. The Transcendent could touch the universe again, but only through willing connections, only through those who chose to share with it. "I remember," the Transcendent said, and its multitude voice was focusing, becoming singular. "I remember being small, being afraid, being happy with simple things." Origin's presence surrounded them all, and when it spoke, there was approval in its vast voice. "You have passed the test, not by defeating the Transcendent, but by teaching it, by showing that connection doesn't require consumption, that unity doesn't demand uniformity." They were back on Origin's actual surface now, but it was transforming. The dark crystal was becoming clear, the veins of sickly light turning warm and golden. The planet was healing itself, and with it, the Transcendence prison was becoming something else, not a cage, but a sanctuary. "The restoration wave," Origin continued, "will now carry a new pattern. Not forced evolution or simple healing, but an invitation to grow, to connect, to become more while remaining yourself. The Transcendent will be part of this, no longer a prisoner but a guide, learning as it teaches." That Daniel felt the change ripple through his connection to the vault. The restoration wasn't just a wave anymore, it was a network, connecting every touched world, not in uniformity, but in communication. Worlds could share knowledge, resources, and support without losing their individual character. "There's more," Origin said, and for the first time, there was something like humor in its voice. "The Crixon's corrupted vault, the one I consumed, it can be purified, transformed into something useful. A second restoration node, one that understands the darker aspects of evolution and can help worlds that have gone down dangerous paths." The evolved Crixon commander stepped forward, its corrupted form trembling. "You would trust us with this, after what we tried to do." "Trust is earned through action," Origin replied. "You chose to help in the test rather than take advantage. That's a beginning." Over the following days, they worked together to establish the new restoration network. The vault station connected to Origin, creating a stable bridge between the prison sanctuary and the wider galaxy. The 20 guides, now truly understanding their role, prepared to return to their worlds as teachers and connectors rather than controllers. Arya approached Daniel and Neva as they stood watching Origin's transformation. "What happens to you two now? The life debt that started this was never really about debt," Neva interrupted, looking at Daniel with those amber eyes that had seen so much with him. "It was about choosing to be bound, choosing to stand together." "The restoration still needs us," Daniel added. "Not to control it, but to help it learn, to be the bridge between it and the species it's trying to help. It's not a burden anymore, it's a purpose." "And," Harper's voice interrupted from the station speakers, "someone needs to keep these two from making any more galaxy-shaking decisions on a whim. That volunteer was brave enough to become the Transcendent. I'm not nearly that courageous." They laughed, all of them, even the Crixon commander making a sound that might have been amusement. It was absurd, standing on a living prison planet, laughing about the fate of the galaxy. But it was also imperfectly right. The Coalition fleet arrived 3 days later, led by Marcus Steele and Elder Thane. They expected to find disaster. Either Origin consuming everything, or the Transcendent escaped and forcing evolution on the galaxy. Instead, they found something unprecedented: former enemies working together, a restoration network that connected without controlling, and a Transcendent that had chosen to become a teacher rather than a god. "This is impossible," Steele said, his scarred face showing more emotion than Daniel had ever seen. "The Crixin, working with us." The Transcendent contained but not imprisoned worlds, sharing freely without giving up sovereignty. "It's not impossible," Elder Thane corrected, her ancient eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "It's just new, and new is what the galaxy needs." The integration wasn't immediate or perfect. There were still conflicts, still worlds that resisted the restoration, still those who wanted to use it for power rather than healing. But now, there was a framework for dealing with these challenges, not through force, but through connection, education, and choice. Daniel found himself appointed as one of the primary restoration coordinators, working with beings from hundreds of worlds to guide the network's growth. But his favorite moments were still the simple ones: fixing a broken system on a struggling colony, teaching new guides how to listen to the restoration's whispers, working alongside Neva as they had from the beginning. 6 months after Origin's awakening, they stood together on Earth, watching as the restoration wave finally reached humanity's birthworld. It was gentler here. More subtle. Earth had its problems, but nothing like the devastation other worlds had faced. The restoration simply cleaned the oceans a little, helped forests grow a little stronger, gave humanity's tired soil new life. "It's not dramatic," Daniel observed. "The best healing rarely is," Neva replied. "It's the small changes, the gradual improvements, the connections made one at a time." They watched as Earth's government struggled to understand what was happening, as scientists raced to study the restoration, as ordinary people simply marveled at flowers blooming where they hadn't before. "They'll want to control it," Daniel predicted. "They'll learn they can't," Neva said with certainty. "Just like everyone else did. And then they'll learn to work with it instead." A communication request came through Arya Moss, now leading the guide program on her homeworld, reporting another successful integration. Thomas Reed had managed to use restoration principles to create self-sustaining gardens on Mars. The Crixin commander, who had taken the name Renaissance, was working to help other corrupted Crixin find balance between their mechanical and biological natures. Even the Transcendent, speaking through Origin, occasionally offered insights no longer as a would-be god, but as a being learning to be part of something larger than itself while remaining singular. Its favorite activity, surprisingly, was helping children on various worlds understand that being different wasn't wrong, that perfection wasn't the goal, that growth meant accepting both success and failure. "Harper," Daniel called out. "Status report on the Restoration Network." 342 worlds successfully integrated, 68 in process, approximately 900 more showing initial restoration signs. The AI replied. "Also, you have a meeting with the Coalition Council in an hour. Neva has 3 combat training sessions with new guides this afternoon, and someone needs to fix the coffee maker in the station's break room because I don't have hands, and everyone's complaining." "The coffee maker," Daniel laughed. "After everything we've been through, I'm back to fixing coffee makers." "Someone has to," Neva said, smiling. "And you did say you fix things. You just never specified the scale." As they walked back into the vault station, now a hub of activity with guides and coordinators from across the galaxy, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a desperate act of kindness, saving someone who wasn't supposed to be saved. It had nearly ended in catastrophe multiple times. But somehow, through choices both large and small, through connections both forced and chosen, they had helped the galaxy find a new path. The restoration wasn't finished. It might never be truly finished. There would always be damage to heal, connections to make, lessons to learn. But now there was hope. And more importantly, there was choice. Worlds could choose their own paths to healing. Species could choose to connect without losing themselves. Even transcendent beings could choose to remain part of the messy, imperfect, beautiful tapestry of life. "So," Neva said as they entered the station, "ready for the next crisis?" "With you," Daniel replied, taking her hand and feeling that familiar warm glow flow between them. Always. Behind them, Origin hung in space like a golden jewel. The Transcendence prison transformed into a beacon of possibility. The restoration wave continued its spread, no longer a force of change, but an invitation to grow. And throughout the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, beings of every species were learning the same lesson Daniel and Neva had discovered in the chaos of a mining station under attack. Sometimes, the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand together. Not from perfection, but from the beautiful imperfection of life itself. The journey that had begun with a broken leg and an act of defiance against tradition had become something neither of them could have imagined. They were partners, teachers, healers, and bridges between worlds. But more than that, they were proof that connection real, chosen, imperfect connection could overcome any obstacle, heal any wound, and transform any prison into a sanctuary. And in the break room of the vault station, a coffee maker waited to be fixed. Because even in a galaxy transformed by restoration waves and transcendent beings, some things remained wonderfully, necessarily ordinary.